Imagine you're 28 years old. You just went through the literal physical marathon of childbirth.
Oh, absolute marathon.
Right. And now you're waking up every 2 hours to nurse a newborn. You are just, you're beyond exhausted.
Yeah, completely drained.
You are giving literally everything you have to keep this tiny human alive. And then without any warning whatsoever, your body secretly plunges into a state identical to menopause.
I mean, it is a massive physiological shock, and yet it's kind of the absolute definition of a biological blind spot.
Yeah.
It's this massive systemic shift that goes, largely unmentioned in standard postpartum care.
Which is wild because usually when we talk about postpartum recovery, there's this expectation of a very predictable linear timeline, like you're reading a textbook or something.
Right, the classic 6-week checkup.
Exactly. You have the baby, you rest a bit, you go to your 6-week appointment, the doctor gives you the all clear, and you're just supposed to seamlessly resume your normal life. You are supposedly, quote unquote, healed.
Yeah, it's framed as this clean, definitive finish line because we like biological processes to be neatly categorized.
Oh, totally.
But stepping into the reality of the postpartum body, especially for mothers who are exclusively breastfeeding, well, it reveals that the 6-week finish line is completely illusory.
It really is. So if you are listening to this right now, maybe at 3 a.m. while nursing, and you've been secretly wondering why your pelvic floor feels like sandpaper, you need to know you are not broken.
Absolutely not.
We are looking at a physical landscape that is shrouded in silence and, frankly, incredibly painful for a lot of women. So today on The Deep Dive, we are shining a massive spotlight on a surprisingly common yet rarely discussed physical challenge for new mothers.
We're talking about severe vaginal dryness, tissue damage, and pain during breastfeeding.
Yeah, it's treated like this taboo topic, like something you just have to silently endure.
But you absolutely do not have to endure it. We have a fantastic stack of sources in front of us today, including a really cutting-edge neurobiology study on mice from the Journal of Life.
Which is fascinating, by the way.
It really is. And we've also got clinical insights from pelvic pain rehabilitation specialists, plus established medical guidelines on postpartum care.
Right. And our goal here isn't just to validate that this pain is real, though, I mean, it absolutely is. Our mission for this deep dive is to map out the incredible, invisible domino effect happening inside a mother's body.
That's right.
We're going to answer one vital question today. How does the prolonged elevation of prolactin levels during exclusive breastfeeding suppress the ovarian axis and induce acute tissue dryness?
This is a complex chain reaction.
It really is. We're going to trace the exact biological mechanism, starting with the baby's suckle, traveling deep into the maternal brain, watching it literally shut down the ovaries, and ultimately seeing how that causes acute tissue drought in the pelvic region.
And crucially, we are going to explore the science-backed solutions to actually fix it.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Well, the best place to start is at the very beginning of that cascade, which is the act of nursing itself. When a baby latches and begins to suckle, that physical stimulation isn't just, a local event at the breast.
It's not just happening right there.
Exactly. It sends a neural signal straight up the spinal cord to the mother's pituitary gland, which sits right at the base of the brain.
And the pituitary gland responds to that signal by pumping out a hormone called prolactin.
Which is perfectly named.
Yeah, the name kind of gives away its main job, prolactation. It's the primary hormone that drives milk supply. Without it, you simply cannot sustain breastfeeding.
But prolactin is a really powerful multitasker. It doesn't just travel back down to act on the breast tissue, it acts on the brain itself.
Okay.
And this is where that eLife study becomes incredibly important. The researchers wanted to know exactly how elevated prolactin suppresses a mother's fertility.
Because we've known for centuries that breastfeeding naturally spaces out pregnancies, right? But the exact switch in the brain wasn't perfectly mapped.
Exactly. For a long time, the debate was kind of blurry. People wondered, is it the sheer physical exhaustion of making milk that stops a woman's cycle?
Which would make sense.
Right. Or is it the nervous system sensing the suckling? Or is it the prolactin itself? These researchers managed to isolate the prolactin variable in a really ingenious way.
Okay, lay it on me.
What's fascinating here is that they zeroed in on a very specific cluster of cells in the brain's hypothalamus called arcuate kisspeptin neurons.
Okay, I have to stop you there because kisspeptin is such a great name. But what actually are they doing in the brain?
They are essentially the vital pacemakers of the reproductive system. To understand them, the researchers used an advanced imaging technique called GCAM-P fiber photometry.
Wow, okay. That sounds intense.
It is. In simple terms, this technique allows scientists to look inside a conscious, living brain and literally watch individual neurons light up with a fluorescent glow every single time they fire.
So they can literally see the brain thinking, or, well, firing.
Right. So they observed these kisspeptin neurons in mice.
And normally, outside of pregnancy and lactation, these kisspeptin neurons are firing together in these beautiful, coordinated, episodic bursts, right? They have a steady rhythm.
A very clear rhythm, yes. But the researchers saw that during lactation, when prolactin levels are through the roof, these kisspeptin neurons just go completely silent.
They just shut off.
Yeah, they lose their rhythm entirely. They're heavily suppressed.
Okay, but how did they prove that the prolactin was doing it and not just like the stress of nursing?
To prove that prolactin was the direct, undeniable cause of the silence, the scientists did something remarkable. They genetically deleted the prolactin receptors, but only from those specific arcuate kisspeptin neurons.
Oh,
Yeah. The rest of the mouse's body, including the breast tissue, still had its receptors and could respond to prolactin perfectly normally.
So the mouse could still produce milk and nurse her pups just fine.
Exactly, but those specific kisspeptin neurons in the brain were suddenly deaf to the prolactin signal. They couldn't, quote-unquote, hear that the mother was lactating.
And what happened?
The results were immediate. By day 5 of lactation, while the mice were still actively nursing and fully supporting their litters, those kisspeptin neurons reactivated.
That is wild.
And the mice prematurely resumed their reproductive cycles, which proves, unequivocally, that prolactin action directly on those specific neurons is absolutely necessary to suppress fertility during lactation.
Okay, let me make sure I'm wrapping my head around this causality. Are kisspeptin neurons basically the spark plugs of the reproductive engine?
That is a brilliant way to visualize it, yes.
Okay, so if kisspeptin neurons are the spark plugs, then prolactin is acting like a governor switch. While a mother is nursing, prolactin comes in and essentially unplugs the spark plugs.
Spot on.
The engine simply cannot turn over. It doesn't matter how much fuel you have. Without that coordinated electrical burst, nothing happens.
And because those spark plugs have been unplugged, the entire reproductive system downstream just powers down. If we follow the lack of a signal, we can see how this domino effect shuts down the ovarian axis entirely.
Where does that signal fail next? Because kisspeptin doesn't talk to the ovaries directly, right? That's way too far away.
Right, it doesn't. The kisspeptin neurons normally stimulate the hypothalamus to release a hormone called GnRH, or gonadotropin-releasing hormone.
Okay.
But because prolactin has silenced the kisspeptin neurons, the release of GnRH drops drastically.
Got it.
Without GnRH, the pituitary gland, which is our relay station, stops sending out its own signals. It stops sending pulsatile waves of FSH, which is follicle-stimulating hormone, and LH, luteinizing hormone.
Okay, and those two hormones, FSH and LH, are what normally travel down to tell the ovaries to mature an egg and release it.
Exactly.
So the brain stops sending them, the ovaries essentially go dormant, they stop the ovulation process, and as a result, menstruation does not return.
Which is known in the medical community as LAM, or the lactational amenorrhea method.
Right. When a mother is exclusively breastfeeding, this system acts as nature's built-in birth spacing mechanism.
It is an incredibly elegant evolutionary adaptation. I mean, making milk requires a staggering amount of metabolic energy. A lactating mother is essentially fueling two bodies around the clock.
Yeah, it's exhausting just thinking about it.
By shutting down the reproductive cycle, the body brilliantly conserves resources. It prevents the massive energy expenditure of a new pregnancy while she is still sustaining the current infant.
So what does this all mean for the mother's day-to-day physical reality? Because an elegant evolutionary system sounds great on paper, but we know there's a serious catch for the woman actually living through it.
There is a profound catch. When the ovaries go dormant to conserve energy, they don't just stop releasing eggs, they also stop producing crucial hormones.
Like what?
Specifically estrogens and androgens, like testosterone.
Wait, they just shut down. The hormone factories completely closed their doors.
It's an immediate halt. Clinically, the lactating mother enters a hypoestrogenic and hypoandrogenic state. Her systemic levels of estrogen and testosterone plummet to rock bottom. Physiologically speaking, this hormonal profile mimics menopause.
That is just, let that sink in for a second. You have a woman in her 20s or 30s recovering from the physical trauma of childbirth, and her body is suddenly experiencing a hormonal drought identical to menopause.
It's jarring.
And this brings us to the localized physical symptoms, the really painful fallout of that systemic hormone drop. We tend to think of estrogen purely as a reproductive hormone, like something that just regulates periods.
And that is a dangerous misconception. Estrogen is an essential structural maintenance hormone for the entire pelvic region.
Okay.
It is what maintains the thickness, the elasticity, the blood flow, and the lubrication of the vaginal walls. There are estrogen receptors absolutely everywhere in the genitourinary tract.
Yeah, the sources outline just how extensive these receptors are. They're in the clitoris, they're in the vulva, they're even in the trachea of the bladder.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, when you withdraw that estrogen for months on end during breastfeeding.
Wait, really quickly, just so we are all on the same page. The trigone of the bladder, what is that?
Ah, right. The trigone is a smooth triangular area at the very base of the bladder, right where the urethra connects.
Okay.
And it is highly sensitive to estrogen. So when estrogen drops, the tissue in the vagina, the urethra, and that base of the bladder becomes incredibly delicate. It thins out. It loses its elasticity.
Which causes all these downstream problems.
Exactly. The medical community has finally given a specific name to this cascading issue, genitourinary syndrome of lactation, or GSL.
GSL. I'm so glad they finally gave it a clinical name because for years, women were just brushed off and told it was, normal postpartum dryness.
Right, like it's no big deal.
Calling it a syndrome acknowledges the severity of it. Our sources indicate that up to 93% of women with GSL symptoms experience severe dryness.
And dryness doesn't quite capture the reality of the condition. It causes constant burning, itching, a significant decrease in sexual arousal, and dyspareunia, which is the medical term for severe, painful sex.
It gets even more intense than that, too. The lack of estrogen means the tissue stops synthesizing collagen properly. The skin actually loses its mechanical strength.
It literally becomes fragile.
Yeah, the sources note that this can lead to literal fissuring skin, splitting open at the posterior fourchette. Let's translate that for everyone.
I see.
The posterior fourchette, we are talking about the very entrance to the vagina, right at the bottom.
Yes, it's that band of skin at the lower opening of the vagina. Because it lacks collagen and elasticity, just normal movement or attempts at intimacy can cause that skin to literally tear open.
Ouch.
Yeah, creating these microfissures that are excruciatingly painful and so slow to heal.
I saw something else in the clinical sources that blew my mind, actually. It said the systemic hormone drop somehow starves the good bacteria in the vaginal microbiome. I didn't quite get that connection. How does a drop in estrogen kill off lactobacilli?
It's a fascinating, if unfortunate, chain reaction. Estrogen is the hormone that tells your vaginal cells to produce and store a sugar called glycogen.
Okay, I'm with you.
The good bacteria, the lactobacilli, feed on that glycogen. And as a byproduct of eating it, they produce lactic acid, which keeps the vaginal pH nice and acidic, protecting against infections.
I see. So in the state of genitourinary syndrome of lactation, the lack of estrogen means no glycogen. The lactobacilli literally starve to death.
Exactly.
And without that lactic acid, the vaginal pH shifts from a highly protective, acidic environment to a very vulnerable alkaline one.
And that alkaline environment throws open the gates for hostile organisms. Bacteria from the skin or the gut, like E. coli, suddenly find a highly hospitable environment in the vagina and urethra. They thrive.
Which completely explains why lactating mothers with GSL often experience recurrent urinary tract infections alongside dysuria, which is a burning sensation during urination.
The urethral mucosa thins out just like the vaginal tissue, making the bladder hypersensitive and trauma-prone.
I have to jump in here and just challenge the evolutionary logic for a second. Sure, I get why nature wants to stop ovulation to space out babies. But why on earth would nature design a brilliant system to nourish an infant, but simultaneously make the mother's body so vulnerable to pain, tissue tearing, and chronic infections? If evolutionary success is about survival, having a mother prone to recurrent UTIs and severe pain seems like a massive design flaw.
This raises such an important question, and it really highlights a common paradox in evolutionary biology. Evolution doesn't optimize for your comfort,
Right.
It optimizes for the survival of the offspring to reproductive age.
It just wants the baby to live.
Exactly. The metabolic cost of a concurrent pregnancy is so dangerously high for a nursing mammal that the blunt instrument of completely shutting down the ovaries is deployed. In the harsh environment of early human evolution, spacing out births meant the difference between life and death for the infant.
Yeah.
So the mother's profound discomfort and even her increased risk of localized infection, well, it was deemed an acceptable biological trade-off.
A brutal trade-off. It's like, we will ensure your baby doesn't have competition for milk, but your pelvic floor is going to feel like sandpaper, and you might get chronic UTIs.
It is incredibly rough.
But thankfully, we are not living in the Stone Age. We don't have to just accept evolutionary trade-offs anymore. Having mapped this drought from the brain all the way to the local tissues, how do we hack this biological design?
Right. How do we fix this?
Yeah, how do we solve this painful reality without forcing a mother to stop breastfeeding?
Fortunately, there are highly effective science-backed solutions. We can kind of approach this in stages: short-term relief, medium-term management, and actual medical intervention.
Let's start with short term. If a mother and her partner are attempting intimacy, over-the-counter lubricants are absolutely essential. But our clinical sources are very specific here. You cannot just grab whatever colorful bottle is on the pharmacy shelf.
Definitely not.
The exact medical guidelines state they must be water-based. Why is that so rigid?
Water-based is crucial because it washes away easily and doesn't trap the hostile bacteria we just discussed against that really delicate tissue.
Makes sense.
But you also have to read the ingredients carefully. You need a product that is pH balanced specifically for vaginal use, and it must be fragrance-free.
And here is a term from the guidelines that I really want to highlight: low osmolality. Wait, osmolality? Like osmosis from high school biology.
Precisely like high school biology. If a lubricant has high osmolality, it means it has a really high concentration of solutes, like sugars or salts.
Okay.
By the laws of osmosis, water always moves toward the higher concentration. So that highly concentrated lube will actually pull water out of the surrounding vaginal cells to balance things out.
Wait, so a lube that feels wet initially is actually dehydrating your cells microscopically.
That is the cruel irony of it. It worsens the tissue damage and the dryness in the long run.
Oh my gosh. Avoid high osmolality at all costs.
Yeah.
The guidelines also say to avoid glycerin. Why? Glycerin is in almost everything.
Glycerin is essentially a sugar alcohol. And in an environment where your pH is already alkaline and your good bacteria are starved, pumping a sugar into the vagina is like opening an all-you-can-eat buffet for yeast and bad bacteria.
Oh, yikes.
It is a recipe for a raging yeast infection.
Good to know. So avoid glycerin, avoid warming agents, because honestly, why would you want to apply artificial heat to already burning, irritated tissue? And avoid parabens.
And a quick PSA, never use oil-based products if you are relying on latex condoms because the oil degrades the latex and causes it to break.
Right, super important. So that covers the short-term mechanics of intercourse. Lube is great for the moment, but that doesn't solve the fact that a mother is walking around in pain 247. How do we actually change the environment of the tissue itself on a daily basis?
For medium-term relief, we look at vaginal moisturizers. These are fundamentally distinct from lubricants.
Because a lubricant is just for the act of sex, right? A vaginal moisturizer is something you use regularly, like a daily or twice weekly skin routine for your face, but for your pelvic floor.
Yes, exactly. Moisturizers are designed to change the fluid content of the tissue over several days. They absorb into the epithelium, replacing normal vaginal secretions and helping to slowly lower the pH back to a healthier, more acidic level.
Which is what we want.
Right. They provide ongoing comfort from the daily itching and chafing.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because you don't just have to manage the symptoms. You can actually treat the root cause of the tissue problem without messing up the breastfeeding machinery in the brain.
Yes.
We're talking about medical solutions, specifically low-dose vaginal estrogen therapy.
This is often the most effective intervention for persistent genitourinary syndrome of lactation. It comes as a cream, a tiny tablet, or a flexible ring placed directly in the vagina.
Hold on. You want to prescribe estrogen to a nursing mother. Every alarm bell in my head is ringing right now. Doesn't estrogen immediately tank breast milk supply? Every lactation consultant warns against estrogen-based birth control for exactly that reason.
And that anxiety is exactly why so many women suffer in silence, fearing that seeking treatment will compromise their ability to feed their baby. But the clinical data draws a massive distinction between systemic and local hormones.
Okay, how so?
A standard birth control pill goes systemic. It gets into the bloodstream and circulates to the breasts and brain. Studies consistently show that low-dose local vaginal estrogen does not do that. It does not enter the bloodstream in meaningful amounts.
It just stays in the neighborhood.
Precisely. The tissue is so incredibly starved for estrogen that the local cells absorb it immediately and utilize it on site. It doesn't show up in breast milk, and it does not reduce milk supply.
That is amazing.
We even know from oncology research that low-dose vaginal estrogen is considered safe for women who have survived estrogen receptor-positive breast cancers. That is how localized the absorption is.
That is such a vital, empowering piece of information. The estrogen repairs the collagen, restores the glycogen for the lactobacilli, and stops the skin fissuring at the entrance of the vagina, all while the prolactin continues to safely govern the brain and milk production upstairs. You don't have to choose between feeding your baby and living without pain.
And beyond hormonal creams, the clinical sources also highlight emerging non-pharmacological options like functional microablative CO2 lasers.
A CO2 laser. Shooting a laser in there sounds like science fiction or, frankly, a bit terrifying given how sensitive the area is.
It definitely sounds intimidating, but it is a highly controlled, FDA-cleared application for tissue atrophy. The laser creates microscopic, painless thermal damage in the vaginal lining.
Okay, wait. Painless damage.
Right. That controlled microdamage tricks the body into triggering its natural healing cascade. It stimulates fibroblasts to produce new collagen and promotes neovascularization.
Let's clarify those terms for everyone. Fibroblasts are the cellular builders that lay down new structural collagen, and neovascularization just means growing a network of brand new blood vessels, right?
You've got it. This biological restructuring brings hydration, blood flow, and elasticity back to the tissue using the body's own repair mechanisms, completely bypassing the need for supplemental hormones altogether.
It is incredible how far the medical management has come once we finally started acknowledging the biology of what is actually happening to women's bodies.
Yeah.
Let's do a quick recap of this incredible journey we just mapped out today.
Let's do it.
We started at the breast, where the baby's suckle triggers the pituitary gland to release prolactin. That prolactin travels to the brain, acting as a neurological governor switch that literally unplugs the arcuate-kisspeptin neurons.
And with the spark plugs pulled, the hypothalamus stops sending GnRH.
Right.
The pituitary stops sending FSH and LH, and the ovaries go to sleep to conserve energy.
And while that brilliantly ensures the infant has no competition for calories, that lack of ovarian activity causes systemic estrogen levels to plummet. This leads directly to the localized tissue drought, the starvation of protective bacteria, and the severe pain known as genitourinary syndrome of lactation.
But with targeted low-osmolality water-based lubricants, consistent moisturizers, and localized low-dose estrogen or laser therapy, you can reverse the drought at the tissue level without disrupting the prolactin signal in the brain.
It's localized landscaping.
It's a perfect example of how understanding the specific underlying biological mechanism allows us to intervene precisely and safely.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a fascinating unsolved mystery straight out of that eLife study. Remember how we proved prolactin suppresses those kisspeptin neurons?
Yes.
Well, the researchers tried giving the lactating mice a drug called bromocriptine, which blocks prolactin.
Right, and logically you would expect that blocking prolactin would completely wake the kisspeptin neurons back up to their rapid pre-pregnancy firing rhythm.
But it didn't. During active lactation, blocking prolactin only partially reversed the suppression of the kisspeptin neurons. They woke up a little bit, but they didn't fully resume their normal rhythm.
Which kind of points to the secret accomplice.
Yeah, exactly. So I want you to mull this over. What other hidden signals are quietly communicating with the mother's brain to keep her reproductive system asleep? Are there metabolic cues triggered by the sheer exhausting energy cost of making milk?
Or maybe other undiscovered hormones tracking maternal fatigue.
Exactly. The human body has redundancies built upon redundancies, and prolactin might just be the master switch we've managed to find so far.
It's a huge puzzle.
It really is.
Yeah.
We started today talking about that unrealistic expectation of the 6-week postpartum checkup. The truth is, if you are experiencing this pain, your body is navigating a deeply complex, beautifully intricate, and sometimes brutal biological tightrope. Your brain is literally prioritizing your baby's survival over your tissue health.
But you don't have to suffer through the fallout.
No, you don't. The more we understand exactly how that tightrope is rigged, the better we can support the women bravely walking it every single day.